G'day everyone and welcome back to another episode. We are back in the shed today and we're going to figure out what is wrong with the motor. If you're wondering what I'm talking about, in the last episode we had this thing on the dyno and literally on the first hit made 200 horse, air fuels were perfect, everything was going good. Manny come off, revved it once and it just started knocking. So there was something obviously wrong with either something that I've done or something wrong with the motor. There was something ready to break and it broke on the bloody dyno. So today we're going to be finding out what exactly is wrong with it. We're going to be pulling the motor. I'm going to play a little sound clip here of the noise that we heard and let you guys hear it again.
Oh dude, that sounds.
In the last video, we were trying to pinpoint exactly where it's coming from. Kind of sounds like it is coming from the bell housing, which makes me think that it might be a loose flex plate, which could be my fault. It could be a broken flex plate. I don't bloody know. So yeah, I guess we will be getting the 4J out of the Patrol and we'll be slapping a barrier in today, guys. That's the plan.
Proudly supported by Superior Engineering and Diesel Conversions Australia.
So most of you guys know the deal. We have to get the bull bar off. I'm going to strip down the grill. It's not going to take too long because I'm actually planning on leaving the turbo and half the stuff that we have fitted onto the motor. Still a fair bit to disconnect. I'm going to have to take off the whole wiring loom, sit it to one side, disconnect the engine mounts, all the bell housing bolts, torque converter's got to be unbolted and pushed back as well. And then there's just little things like the catch can lines and all that sort of stuff. Drain all the fluids, get it out, and then we can have a look at what is going wrong.
2 hours later.
Right, now I was just taking the starter motor off. I then moved the crank around to the torque converter bolts, and the torque converter bolts are loose, which means that actually might be the noise. The torque converter might be like kind of moving in the bell housing, and it was coming from the back of the motor, that noise. So we might be onto it. We might have found the noise. Now I've actually removed 2 bolts down there and they were both loose. So I'm thinking that all 4 are gonna be loose. I just called Manny. Manny reckons chuck them back in with red Loctite, which is what we did the first time. We definitely Loctited them. That was me and Jesse fitting that up. He reckons whack it back in, try and start it, see how it sounds. Worst part is at the moment, we've got all the wiring disconnected. We've got shit everywhere, pulled the intercooler pipes off, but it's only been about an hour and a half. So it's not gonna be too much longer to whack it all back together. Now, what is a little bit concerning though, is if you guys remember, we had to face down the bolts that hold the flex plate onto the motor. If it hasn't been face down enough and the torque converter isn't sitting perfectly flat, I'll tighten it up, but with RPM, it'll just kind of wobble loose again. So I'm not really sure if that is gonna be the issue. I would really like to sort of pull the motor and measure everything again, but I think Manny's right. I think we should just whack it back in. There's a good chance I just didn't put enough torque on the bolts. It's really hard to get in there, so I'm really gonna try and tighten them up a lot this time. Jesse and I definitely use red Loctite too, and that stuff is like, just doesn't come off. So I'm gonna clean the bolts up. I'm gonna degrease inside of the hole, blow it all out, red Loctite it, put it back in, hopefully it holds, and yeah, just go from there, guys. Right, I've gone ahead and refitted all of the torque converter bolts down there. I've actually pulled them off, cleaned all the threads, red Loctited them, and refitted them up. Now, part of the problem is down in there is super tight, and it's really hard to get a tool in, so I've basically ground down a socket, and then using a 1/2-inch socket and a 1/2-inch extension bar, I managed to get it in there and I could just lean all my weight on top of those bolts. They're basically as tight as I can get them. Now the holes are full of Loctite, the bolt is full of Loctite, and I'm hoping that that is gonna be the issue. So now that that is done, I've gotta go ahead and plug everything back in, put the starter motor back on. That way I can actually just start it up. I don't really need to connect too much else at the moment. Then we can make sure that that noise is gone. I've also got to make sure I put oil in it because we drain the oil out. I've got to refit the sump as well. So I'm going to go ahead and do all that. Then we can try it, turn it on, and just see if that noise is gone. I'm really hoping that that was it. All right, we are full of oil. Everything is basically back together. Nothing is tight. So it's probably going to be some rattles if this starts, but hopefully not the rattle that is the reason we are here today. Now I decided just to put the intercooler pipes on loose just so the MAF sensor and the MAP sensor can read what they need to read. But yeah, everything else is back together. There's no water, no power steering fluid. There's heaps of stuff that's still loose, but what I want to do is fire it up, hear if that noise is gone. And if it is, then we can go through and button everything up. So fingers crossed, I'm about to fire it up for the first time. Wish me luck, guys. Phew! Holy crap, it was the flex plate. I'm bloody glad we didn't have to pull that motor apart. Woo! Let's go. That is awesome. There's definitely some rattles, but that's because I got heaps of stuff loose, but holy crap, we are back and we need to go to the dyno. Now, as good as it would have been to pull that motor apart and do a crank, I'm actually kind of glad that we're not doing one. Been spending way too long in the shed, so I want to get this thing buttoned up, get it back down to get a tune. Then we can start using this thing. I'm gonna go around the motor, tighten up all the stuff that's loose, refit the intercooler pipes properly, zip tie some stuff up, then we can start it up, move it out of the shed. I'm gonna call Desta Automotive, let him know that the flex plate is the problem, and we're gonna go from there. All right, as you can see, got the bull bar grill, got the new intake pipe all fitted up. I actually just got off the phone to Emmanuel and he said to try and run that 4-inch intake pipe because he has actually scaled the MAF and he didn't pull it back 100% stock just yet. So we can try that out. Basically, if I hear it knocking just a little bit, it means we have to go back to that 3-inch intake pipe. But if it sounds pretty good, we can get away with this. Now, the other really good thing is that this thing still has the 200 horsepower tune-in that happened on the dyno last week. So it technically is tuned, it is driving, it's not making sounds. So I think we can pull it out, put some water in it, maybe go for a drive, see what 200 horsepower feels like in the old 4J. I'm very excited to actually feel this. Now, basically he said to just cruise for a little bit, just make sure that there's no oil leaks, and because I had the sump off and stuff like that. But once that's done, we can then put the foot flat, which is the first time since putting the 4J in that we've been able to do that, just because it has bigger injectors and obviously different turbo and all that sort of stuff. Apart from the stock tune, this is actually going to be our first tune as well. We can have 3, so there'll be this one, which is the lowest one at 200 horsepower, and then it's going to be like 230 and maybe 260, 270, depending on what we sort of get to. But yeah, even at 200 horsepower, it's by far the fastest diesel I have ever owned. So I'm very excited to feel how she goes in the patrol. Man, it sounds like it's running so much better than when I dropped it off to manual. First time we've heard it with the snorkel on too, actually. Sounds so different, eh? Yeah. That is ridiculous. The pod filter sounds more like JDM, eh?
Yeah. Did you pull over and go through that real quick? See why it's flashing.
Straight away. Every time we hit boost, we get this fault code. Don't know what that means. This thing's gonna be fast, man. If that's 200. Ready? Might head back. I'm going to find out what this fault is because this transmission was way too expensive to have a fault go on while we're driving it.
Solid ripper.
Holy crap. That feels sick, eh? Right, Harry's out of here. That felt friggin' nuts. Can't believe how good 200 horsepower feels. Definitely the fastest diesel I've ever owned. Now, we are getting that transmission code, which I have no idea what that is. But yeah, that honestly feels friggin' amazing, guys. 200 horsepower, jeez. Didn't think it would feel that good, and the auto is shifting so good. The extreme valve body with that torque converter, it just literally snaps into gears. It's really, really fun to drive. I was barely even putting my foot flat then too, and that felt friggin' unreal. I'm really glad that we didn't have to do the crank, and it was just the torque converter bolts that come loose. I'd say I didn't torque them up enough. I don't know. There was definitely red Loctite on the old bolts as well, and I 100% know that we red Loctited them. Hopefully it's going to hold. Hopefully it's not the torque converter sitting off on those bolts that we had to face down. Next step is to get it back to Desta Automotive, get it back on the dyno, get it properly dialed in, make 260 horse, figure out that fault code too, keep forgetting about that. Now I just want to quickly say at the end of this video, a huge thank you to Desta Automotive. He's just made this experience so much better. I was really panicking, but he was just saying, don't worry about it, we'll sort it out no matter what it is. I'll hook you up with parts, whatever you need, I've got it. He actually even sorted out the tow truck for me to get the car back here. He's just a super nice guy. So if you guys do need performance parts or tuning or anything like that, Desta Automotive, I would highly recommend. Now this video probably was a little bit short, but I wanted to bring you guys along just to find out what was going on. I'm sure a few of you are curious as to what was going on, but yeah, safe to say the next time I put flex plate bolts in, I am going crazy on the wrench. So thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you on the next episode. Hopefully back at Desta Automotive, getting a tune. See you then.